Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session on India's startup story. The startup and entrepreneurship culture in India is growing at a rapid speed. Today, youth is focused towards solving problems and making a great business model out of it. As a result, India has over 100 unicorns, and this number, mind you, is fast growing, with over 20 of them entering the billion-dollar club in 2022 itself. This trend has not gone unnoticed and found the fancies of venture capitalists and investors all over the world. Big ticket players are placing their bets on future looking concepts and seeing huge value in it. Some of the investors and venture capitalists have already managed huge returns from the investments they have made in the past. So, without wasting any time, let us now hear from some of the well known startup founders of India how they see the evolution of India's startup story. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. My first guest for the day is Mr. Amit Purohit, founder Fantasy Akhada. Welcome, Amit.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here, Devesh, and looking forward to having a good conversation with everyone on the panel.
Great. Thank you for taking out time for this panel, Amit. My next panelist for the day is Mr. Ganesh Balakrishnan, co-founder Flatheads. Welcome, Ganesh.
Thanks, Devesh. Kick to be here on the panel. Thanks, Sarika, for inviting me on the panel, and hope to have a great discussion going ahead.
And my final panelist for the day is Ms. Sarika Batra, executive producer, director, and showrunner, Meet the Drapers. Welcome, Sarika.
Thank you, Devesh and Ganesh and Amit. I've been looking forward to this amazing conversation we're going to have with this group of esteemed panelists about India. Thank you.
It's a pleasure, having all of you on the panel with me today. Thank you very much for taking our time. My first question is to all of you, and I'll start with Amit first. Amit, how has the startup ecosystem developed over the years? And, would you like to shed some light on the impact of the pandemic, that has taken on the sector?
Yeah, Devesh. So over the last 2.5 years, since the time we've been in the startup ecosystem, obviously we've seen a drastic change and the growth, per se in the startup ecosystem. Like I say, we are ourselves very, very young into the startup ecosystem with just being 2.5 years old. But what in my limited journey as a startup founder over the last 2.5 years, what I have observed is the acceptability of this startup ecosystem has really grown, and I talk about at all levels, whether it is at the entrepreneurs level where taking such risks, the family supporting such risks, etc. has become has normalized to a large extent. People looking at startups as a potential employment opportunity and a stable one at that, irrespective of whatever journey the startup is going through or whatever life cycle the startup is at, is again something that has become more normalized than it was when I was starting up 2.5 years back. And I guess veteran startup founders can comment better on that. So these are two very, very important things that I see that have changed drastically in the last 2.5 years since the time I have been in this ecosystem. Before that, my understanding, and in fact, when we were just starting up also, and not just for us, but for some of our senior counterparts in the industry, I used to feel that there were a lot of hurdles at a personal, professional, and then at an employment level that people used to face. So that is one big change that I am foreseeing and that I'm seeing over the last 2.5 years, and I think it is only going to get better and better. As far as the pandemic is concerned, I personally believe that it is a very industry specific answer that you will get. So if you were to ask someone who was running a startup which required people to go out, then the answer would be very different. But if you asked someone, where you wanted more and more disposable time and money for people to sit at home and consume various things online, etc., I think the answer would be very different. I can stick to my industry and answer this for fantasy sports and for gaming in general. The pandemic did turn out, it's not appropriate to say so, but it did turn out to be a blessing in disguise, because a lot of people were at home with a lot of time at hand and a lot of flexibility at hand. So for us, primarily, like I say, in the fantasy sports ecosystem and the gaming ecosystem, the pandemic in fact did give some sort of spikes in business. which like I say is not the best thing to say, but is the reality as far as the gaming industry is concerned. So personally, I believe that the last 3 years, including the pandemic, as far as the startup ecosystem for the gaming industry and the fantasy sports industry is concerned, I think it's only gotten better. Whether it's acceptability, whether it is people looking at this as a potential employment opportunity, and from a business metric point of view, where things have grown significantly.
I totally agree with you, Amit, when you said that, that acceptance for startups in the Indian ecosystem has increased. Previously when people talked about, starting their own businesses, as startups, families was not very comfortable about the idea. But today the acceptance is much more. And, the young millennial parents, they are now, pretty much open to that idea of, their children going for the startup. And secondly, absolutely, I agree that pandemic was a blessing in disguise for the gaming industry. Sarika, what's your thought, how the startup ecosystem has developed over the years in India?
Well, just from the course of our show, we travel around the world looking at entrepreneurs. And I can tell you that some of the smartest entrepreneurs that we have found have come from India. In 2020, Tim Draper and I held a pitch event in Mumbai, and entrepreneurs came from all over to apply. And I was actually quite surprised at how smart they were in thinking through their business. They were at par with what we see in Silicon Valley, as far as looking at the business as a proper business, how they were going to scale. They were thinking globally, not only India. We saw a lot of people solving grassroots types of problems, which was really nice to see. I'm really looking at India as a whole, trying to solve climate change, as well as perhaps cure cancer and solve problems for disabled people. So AI, artificial intelligence, the startup ecosystem in India has really, really moved forward. Tim always says he remembers when he went to India maybe 20 years ago or so. And when he would speak to entrepreneurs back then, it felt like they had a long way to go. But now when you go to India, they're at par with what you see with top tier startups in Silicon Valley, or even better, and anywhere else in the world, as they have this large market. As far as the pandemic goes, there are definitely some opportunities that came up. One being that entrepreneurs used to be that they'd have to come get a meeting. You had to be face to face. During the pandemic, we were hearing pitches from all over the world. It was incredible. And now I think that's just here to stay. You don't have to actually fly to Silicon Valley. You can just get on Zoom and pitch your company to anybody. So I think that was a really positive thing that came out.
Yeah, another thing I believe the pandemic has done is that, about the getting rid of the face-to-face meetings. Although post-pandemic era, we are again seeing, a lot of business meetings going on face-to-face, but, traditionally where, business meetings were not accepted or were not kind of preferred over Zoom meetings. Today, it's much more a norm. You don't need to travel. You don't need to, be present face to face when you're talking across the continents. It can be done just over sitting a call. That's a pretty much positive. Ganesh, what's your thought? You have been running a great startup, and how do you see the startup ecosystem in India evolve over the years?
So, funny anecdote. I was just thinking about what Amit was saying about it being more acceptable among Indian families. I remember first jumped into entrepreneurship 10 years ago. A lot of our, initial employees would basically have a problem getting married, because during the background check, they will say, "Arey, startup." I don't know if that is a very safe enough bet, right? But now it has come to conversations. What's your ESOP structure inside your company as part of the diligence, right? So it's a very different world now. I think over the last 10 years, I've been part of the ecosystem here and been fortunate to see how the ecosystem has evolved. I think over the 10 years now, we started as a oriented entrepreneur ecosystem. We've moved into products, and now we are moving into homegrown Indian products and services for the world, right? So now it is developed in India, but with a global application, right? So we've come a long way from there. next generation entrepreneurs who have worked in startups before, or second time entrepreneurs who have done one startup and are starting up again. So there's a lot of maturity in the entrepreneurs ecosystem now, right? And you can see the VC ecosystem evolving along with that as well, right? A lot of quality startups to choose from, if you will, right? That is the second thing. The third I noticed is angel investing has hit an all-time high in the last 3 to 4 years. Right, entrepreneurs themselves are giving back to the ecosystem not only with capital but also with operational, intelligence and very very active board involvement. So that way, it's very encouraging signs for the next set of startups coming out for the next decade for sure. In terms of the pandemic, I think we are at the exact opposite spectrum of what Amit has seen with the gaming industry, because we make casual footwear, right? Flatheads is a casual footwear brand. And during the pandemic, it was a big challenge for us because people weren't stepping out at all, right? So suddenly the market was taken off from under our feet, if you will. And it was more a survival game of, how long can we last before the market comes back again. And then there was a revenge buying cycle as soon as the lockdown was opened up, right? So we've seen that multiple times now. So adjusting your business model and adjusting your parameters in terms of marketing and product to make sure that you take care of these kind of once in a generation business disruptions is something that we learned here during the last 3-4 years. The one thing that was also very interesting for us was the opportunity on the supplier side. When the pandemic first hit, a lot of suppliers lost their business from the European and markets, right? Because global supply chains were disrupted in a big way. So for us, it was an opportunity when we were trying to localize our supply chain in India. We found suppliers who were working with marquee brands out there and understood world-class quality. And they were willing to work with small startups like us, right? Because they had empty capacity which they could not use. So they were more open to having conversations with us. And that relationship has held together even now when, the pandemic has gone away, they've got their original orders back. But we are still, working with them in a big way because they understand that we are genuinely trying to do something innovative and disruptive in this market. So it has not just been a challenge, but also an opportunity on the other side is what I would say.
Your conversation about, that the ESOP structure, which people are asked now in the marriage questions. One of the fintech founder, he was with me in another panel. He mentioned that, they advertised in IPL last year. Okay. So when, some of the colleagues' parents saw the ads on the IPL, they were assured that, they are in the right organization and they were able to marry their children. So that was, how advertising actually helped, digital advertising, how it helps startups to get their, employees married. Yeah. Coming on to you, Amit, what is the driving force, that you feel, which helps in the rapid growth of the startup ecosystem in India? What are some of the key driving forces actually?
Firstly, I believe that, the biggest driving force is, I think, India's population. I think the sheer market that is available for people to think of business models. And while there was a huge, I think there was a big phase, and I think someone like Ganesh can vouch for it, that there was a big phase when people were, probably not even thinking of business models and just looking at burn and grow kind of a strategy. But today, people have started realizing the importance of path to profitability and, what is the business model, etc. That is where the Indian, vastness and the population comes into the play, basically. Like, if you are able to build a legal, scalable and a profitable business, that is where there is true value in terms of what you're building, right? And I personally believe that the sheer volume of people that is available to founders and to business owners in this country is a big driving force for people to think of ideas and solve for real life problems and build, sustainable and scalable businesses. So I think the first thing is that. Apart from that, digital penetration in the country, and how mobile handset penetration and the data connectivity has gone very, very wide and has become cheaper, is something that has been a very, very big driving force for the ecosystem again, because you are able to reach out to a lot more people at much lesser cost, and which is going to be a game changer, and has been a game changer. Even going forward, it will continue to be so I think that is the second biggest thing. And apart from that, I think the sheer amount of money that is now involved, in terms of whether it is the right kind of startups raising the right kind of money and the amount of money, I think people also see this as a very, very big wealth value creation kind of an opportunity, where I often go back to the employment topic, because I genuinely believe that the right kind of people are getting jobs which is where they can make a difference. They have the freedom to execute, and they're also making decent amount of money on the back of doing that. And that was not necessarily the case always. You could be working in the corporate, making a lot of difference, being very honest to your job, but probably that kind of disproportionate growth in wealth was not there, which is what people are witnessing now in the right kind of startups, or by taking this punt and plunge in their lives. So I think this has again, because eventually the startups would all collapse if there were not enough right kind of people to work for them and take the startups to the next level, right? Because it cannot be just the founder's vision. Of course, founder's vision, etc., is very important, but eventually you need the right kind of people to execute the vision as well. So acceptability and the kind of wealth creation that's available here, then the digital penetration and the data getting cheaper, and mobile penetration, and the sheer amount of people available for you to target and then grow your business into a legal, scalable, and a profitable model is something that I believe that makes India very, very ripe startup market. And I think it is not going to change anytime soon, because like I said, the real life problems that are available for business owners and founders to solve are immense right now.
Absolutely. Sarika, what's your thought? You have conversations with startup founders and VCs across the world, throughout the Silicon Valley. So, what do you think are the key driving forces behind the rapid growth of India's startup ecosystem?
Amit, I think pretty much hit the nail on the head with this one. It's really the numbers. And I think India's population is younger also, and they're consuming products. I also think India's population consumes media at a level that you don't see in other places in the world. And this gives products the opportunity to reach people. You reach people at mass scale, you can easily get to the end customer. And now with the younger population, with the economy improving, there's buying power as well. So I think all of those elements make India very, very attractive. Sometimes I tell entrepreneurs here that are just looking for numbers, I often tell them, you should launch in India. Just go for India. That should be your first market. If you want numbers, you'll get numbers. It's very hard to attain that type of distribution anywhere else.
Correct. Taking on from Sarika's point, Ganesh, when a startup is creating a product for the Indian market, the diversity of Indian market, needs the product to be, adhered accordingly. How difficult and how tricky is that? Something that, you think of an idea, but it may not adhere to the requirement of the market. So how difficult it's for startup founders to actually tailor the product in a way, that suits the need of the market.
I think, understanding India's diversity is very, very critical. Just in terms of building your product market fit before you start scaling itself, right? So India itself, if you look at it, there is the first, 20 million to 50 million people who are the, English speaking, a little more homogeneous top 8 city, top 10 city, India A market. And then after that, there is the next 100 million, right, which is a little more of the regional, but highly educated and highly, with disposable incomes as well. Then comes the Bharat and the next billion consumers, and bottom of the pyramid, right? So there are so many layers to India, not just geographically, but even within each city, there are each of these, psychographic layers, which you need to understand. And then you really need to position your product to which market you're really catering to and the audience you're catering to. Accordingly, the channels are different. The way to reach the customer and engage with the customer is different. Even the language is different depending on which region or which kind of customer you're going after, right? So there is a massive space, if you will, to build different segments of the same product for different audiences as well.
Correct.
So thinking about it that way, you could almost build the umbrella business of gaming with one premium level, one specific to Indian local languages and audiences, and so on. So you can do a lot in that area, is what I feel. This is where product market fit becomes critical. So pricing for each of those audiences is very different, right? So you need to understand what your value proposition needs to be and what pricing needs to be for each of those audiences. And then the way to monetize might be different, right? Some people might be open to subscription models. Some people will be more, prepaid kind of prepaid and, use as you go kind of models. So there are multiple things in terms of layers, not just the product, that you really need to think about. Distribution, it could not just be online, it could also be offline, because a lot of India is still very much offline and online is just kicking off now, right? So there's a lot more to consider there. So complexities are immense. So it's really important for startup founders to think about, narrowly what is that segment of customers you're targeting before you start thinking about scaling your business.
Right. Amit, do you concur with Ganesh's views? How was, what are the kind of challenges that you have faced in the gaming sector, while catering to these audiences?
So actually, gaming again is a very, I personally don't see that, at least fantasy sports, and it wouldn't be right to comment on gaming as an overall sector because my knowledge there will be limited. But as far as fantasy sports is concerned, I think a majority of our user base comes from tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities, and not really from the metros. Metros, our metro folks are more, seasonal for us. They, in their corporate offices, if they have, an IPL or a T20 World Cup going on, they eventually decide to participate along with friends, etc. But it's not, they are not the core of our business. So for us, it's very, very clear that we have to be very focused on the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 markets. And the simple funda there is that we have to, how do we reach out to them with the maximum amount of targeting and least amount of pilferage. Because what happens in our case is that if we add and we decide, that's why you will not see, at least our brand, you will not see Fantasy Akhada anywhere visible apart from cricket games or football games, because we genuinely believe that there is no point in advertising on events where you don't really get the dedicated kind of audience for cricket or football. So that is something that we stay away from. So reaching them in a very targeted manner and in a very focused manner is the biggest challenge. While digital marketing and performance marketing solves for most of your problems, but still, even in digital and performance marketing now, literally the competition is not just within your category but outside of your category also, because Facebook is trying to throw ads to everyone for everything literally. So it's not very easy, but yeah, but I think how do you get the share of mind primarily in the consumer? It used to be share of voice when I was in my job before I started up. It used to be about ensuring that the share of voice was highest for brands on media properties, but now it has become, how do you get the maximum share of mind in the TG that you really want to? So that is becoming a challenge because of the sheer amount of brands that are available trying to compete for the same mind space sometimes. So that is something that we, and again, like I say, advertising over cricket is not something that's very, very cheap. So that again, you have to be very, very cognizant of in terms of what is required, how much is required, and when do you really need to stop. So I think advertising and getting the right mind space is what we find most challenging, and we keep trying to crack every day. And apart from that, then it's a very standard thing of ensuring you don't have churn, etc. But I think that's for another day. But yeah, I think getting the right kind of share of mind is what we try to focus on.
So what are the key forces that drive value to the fantasy sports ecosystem?
So fantasy sports ecosystem, see, is a lot of, there was when I was starting up, actually, a lot, and while we were not one of the early startups in the fantasy sports ecosystem, there were already 180 odd fantasy sports brand when I had started up. But the biggest challenge that I used to face when we were starting up was on the lines of this being compared to gambling. And that is what, we also used to face, key, how do we convince the investor or the audience, etc., that this is not gambling. What I very confidently feel today and see in my audiences, in my investors also, and potential investors at that, not just the investors on board, is that now people compare it a lot to stock market and not gambling with the right kind of people. So what has happened now is that this intelligence or awareness about the category has been the biggest driving force, point number one for us, because it has, what it has done is, now people have, like you see intraday traders, I see in my category a lot of people who literally start playing at morning at 9:30 a.m. and go until 6 p.m. and they play each and every match that is available on any platform that they are playing on, right? So it is like a full time. A lot of people have made it into a very full-time kind of a task that they really research, analyze, and then they eventually start playing fantasy sports with, right? So that understanding of the category and understanding of how this is more on the lines of sports analytics, how, and sports analytics might sound a very fancy term, but if a guy in, say, for example, in Rewari, is sitting down with his notebook and pen and noting down statistics of cricketers who are going to play in the match, and then choosing his best 11, even that is sports analytics, right? So he's making an informed choice on what he's doing. So what has now happened is that from that whole aspect of luck and today lottery kind of a mindset, it has moved to a lot of people doing it with a lot of hard work and research. That has become a very big driving force for us, at least not just volume wise but value wise. The ARPU of a customer has gone up through the roof for us and the category as well, because a lot of people have started putting in disproportionate amount of time and money into what they are doing. So value drivers बहुत सारे हैं इस business में, like I said before in my previous answer, data, mobile, etc. But I feel that those are applicable for a lot of other industries who are on app or on tech, right? But the biggest value driver that we have seen in our business is the cognizance of the category as a safe one, the understanding of a category as an intelligent one, and the opportunity of one being a full-time fantasy sports user, and building on that is something that has given us the maximum kind of growth as a category.
Very interesting, Amit. Sarika, there comes a point, okay, so and then I wanted to answer from a macro view, especially from a VC side, okay, how difficult or how sometimes it becomes really challenging to explain these entire concepts, about the product, to a VC, which is, so ingrained into the Indian systems. Now, when Amit is talking about a guy who's playing, in a small town, Rewari, and he's catering to tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 markets. Sometimes it becomes very difficult for global VCs to understand how the dynamics works in the Bharat market. By Bharat market, I say, the non-metro markets in India. So how challenging it becomes for a startup to convince a VC about their idea, that this particular idea will hit the nail in the Bharat market, but it might not stick to the metro markets. So, what's your thoughts on that?
Honestly, Devesh, that is a challenge, because oftentimes I see entrepreneurs from India pitching to a panel of VCs. And because I have some connection to India, I do understand what they're saying in that market and how this is the product that actually works and will work. Whereas some of my co-panelists or other VCs that are from other parts of the world may not quite grasp it and think, well, this is not going to work, that, or this solution is not unique enough. We've seen this so many times whereas it is unique to that market and it will work in that market. So my advice to entrepreneurs is, hopefully you are pitching a VC that has knowledge of the world. Like somebody like Tim Draper would get it because he's very well versed. He travels a lot. But several VCs, perhaps they aren't. Is you really have to make the assumption that they don't know. And so when you are pitching them, give a little bit of backstory and say, I understand you may have heard this, or in your market, it could be this way. But in India, in this market, this is what's currently happening. Let me give you an example and then pitch your product. It's really in how you tell the story and make the assumption that they don't know and that you're going to have to educate them. Because I've seen this time and time again, where the VCs are like, that's not going to work, or that's not a real problem they're solving. And it actually is in their market. It all comes in your pitch and your storytelling and how you present your product.
True, true. Ganesh, I mean, would you mind sharing, would you like to share, some of the early conversations that you have had with the investors, when you went and pitched your idea to them?
Most of our conversations have been with investors who are specifically looking at India as the market. So they've done their research and their homework. So fortunately for us, we didn't have to set the context of, why brands are necessary in the ecosystem here. So the conversations have been largely around, how big is the market, understanding the quality of the founders, what our startup experience has been, and what are the learnings that we are going to incorporate into the current startup, right? When you're talking about the potential market as well, it is not just about, 1 billion people or having 2 feet and needing footwear. It is also about what is the right segment that you're going after, what is the affordability there, right? So deep diving into the category, into the segment of consumers as well has been the standard conversation. Also, right from the start, I think people are very aware about the challenges of building unit economics in D2C brands. So from day one, I think the conversations have been about how do you build the right economic structure? How do you make sure that your CACs are under control in terms of marketing? How do you build the brand? How do you invest in more ROI based branding as well, right? Influencer marketing and stuff like that, rather than jumping to the largest cricket celebrity to push your brand on day one. So a lot of that conversation has also been there. So broadly, it has been quite a knowledgeable group of people that we have talked to, and it has been from our assumptions on what those questions would be versus the amount of homework that we have had to do in order to have those conversations have been quite good, actually. And it also signifies the level of interest that they have in the market, right? So that's very encouraging to see, right? So that's broadly it.
And I think it has always been about, correct me if I'm wrong, scale is one of the biggest propositions, I believe, when you're talking to a VC. If you're able to show them scale along with the worth in the product and the idea, that can, cut across the market, I think it works better in pitching your story to them, right?
Yeah, so potential to scale, at least we are early stage. So it is more about the potential rather than the actual scale being demonstrated out there. But yes, the opportunity that is available out there is definitely something that they are very aware about and something that they will ask for sure. Right. The ability is judged by the quality of the founders and what they have done before. And of course, there is a research on the market and what the competition is doing. That is part of the story, right? Are there other? If you're thinking of building the next $100 million brand over the next 5 years, have there been other people who have done it? What has been their paths to getting to that scale? Online versus offline, what the incumbents are doing versus what you will do differently. A lot of those questions come in as well when it comes to scale. But early stage has not been as much about demonstrating scale as much as more about the potential.
So Amit, how do you see the government support towards the overall startup ecosystem? Because government has been pretty active in last few years, talking about Digital India, supporting the startup, creating the SEZs. How do you see that growing?
I personally believe that it's something that's evolving and improving over a period of time. There is no doubt about that. I think sometimes it's probably it is just matter of fact also that ease to do business, etc., keeps evolving as compared to when, if I were to talk the same decade back. In our industry, the support is even more required in terms of having very consistent regulation, very clear regulation in terms of what is a game of skill, what is not. So I personally believe that it's natural evolution also, that it becomes easier to do business, or the startup ecosystem with the Startup India certification, etc. It becomes much more, there is cognizance of this whole ecosystem, which is great. Like I said, there is natural evolution that doing business becomes easier over a period of time in most progressive countries, and progressing countries more importantly. So I just feel that that's pretty natural, and that's happening here as well. Apart from that, like I said, specifically for our sector, if the government of late has been taking a lot of initiatives to understand what are the challenges that we are facing. Very recently also we met Mr. Honorable Rajiv Chandrasekhar ji, where we highlighted what are we looking at in terms of clarity from the government in terms of game of skill, etc. So that has also happened there. There is a lot of educated conversation that is happening, which is again great, and it is not a very sweeping statements like gaming is gambling, etc., etc. That is being done away with in the corridors of power as well. So I think that's that way it's moving in the right direction, and I think that is very encouraging for not just gaming founders but also in founders in general.
Ganesh, what are your thoughts about, the government supporting the startups, and what are the kind of supports, which is there, prevalent in your sector?
So on the brand side, I think there is definitely a lot of encouragement in terms of setting up your own, supply chains in India. The support to go global in terms of building an export business out of here, right? In terms of the funding coming through, there is a lot of visibility there, and support in terms of just building the initial centers, encouraging brands to reach out globally, both in terms of sales and customers as well as in terms of funding. That has definitely evolved over the last 5 years for sure. The willingness to come on the table and talk to entrepreneurs and have conversations even with small guys like us has definitely improved, right? Previously it used to be corporates who used to have the all the critical conversations out there. Now they're more open to entrepreneurs for sure, right? You can see the NASSCOM 10,000 startups coming up, which has taken off in a big way. Every state has its own entrepreneurship and incubation centers based on which sector it is, right? Some people are focusing on Web3, some people focusing on the next gen of brands and stuff like that. So there is a lot of support for sure. Of course, when it comes to entrepreneurs, we always want more, right? Just in terms of regulations around e-commerce and clearing up the air around inventory-based versus marketplace models, that has been a debate that has been going back and forth for a long time, right? So once that clears up, there will be a lot more clarity for us to expand our the way we do our business as well. In terms of the enablers. So that is one thing that I would say is still up in the air. Similarly, pricing, payments ecosystem has also evolved, right? Once UPI came through, I think the shift from cash on delivery to UPI has been very, very significant. So in that sense, it has made our lives a lot easier, right? Digital payments have definitely helped. But there, on the other hand, the buy now pay later option that was taking off in a big way with payment ecosystems suddenly hit a roadblock when there was a knee-jerk reaction from the government. So yes, you need to protect consumer interests at all times, but before you do knee-jerk reactions and that affect the business model of companies in a big way. Like Amit kept talking about skill versus gambling based regulations, which has always been in that gray area back and forth. Having conversations with the ecosystem and understanding what the context is and then making a decision would be a lot more helpful. right? And those are starting to happen now, but we wish that it goes much faster. That's the only thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. The intent is there. The action has started, and I believe it needs to be expedited at a faster rate to help more and more entrepreneurs, more and more startups, because India is now becoming the global hub of startups, and big players are looking at it. Sarika, what's the global view of VCs and investors towards the government support towards startup? It would be interesting to know the global view also.
Okay, so I can give you Tim's perspective on what he feels about government support. Around the office, whenever we're about to pick another region to travel to, especially for Meet the Drapers, he always says to pick a region where the government is supporting entrepreneurship. Even if it's at a level where I know in India, entrepreneurs feel like a lot more should be done. But still, the idea is there. Government is supporting and fostering entrepreneurship, which is probably the reason why now so many startups have emerged. The language is there, the ecosystem is there, the baseline has been set. And then from there, private sectors come in and also it makes you guys a little bit more marriageable, I guess. That language is there for your matrimony's sake. But even through Latin America, we were touring around, and small places like the Bahamas. The Bahamas are really looking to foster the ecosystem for entrepreneurship. They invited Tim over. They were talking about how can we bridge the gap between Silicon Valley and the Bahamas? What can we do? And this is very, very interesting for VCs, because once the government sets some kind of foundation, it really gives entrepreneurship and the ecosystem a chance to foster, as long as they don't regulate it too much. That's when there's a problem. They should set the baseline and then let it just happen and evolve and create the partnerships.
Okay. Amit, in your opinion, what are some of the key challenges in building the overall startup, building and scaling the startups in India?
So challenges, I would personally believe that I think challenges are not external. I think first it is internal also. You have to sometimes I see around me, and in fact even within our team, sometimes we feel that there is an excitement to do a lot and attack a lot of problems, but so you have to be very, very clear in terms of what you want to do. I still feel that while we've become a global hub for startup ecosystem and all of that, I still feel that people keep making the same mistakes and not learn from their predecessors. I am a very firm believer of this, because probably because some of the successful predecessors have become celebrity-ish in the country, so probably they're not even it's not very I probably am not able to word it, but what I'm trying to say is that it's not very academic, the whole journey of a startup founder. It probably can never be, but I still feel that people are not feeding off each other in terms of generations in the country, where they don't end up making the same mistakes which some of the predecessors might have made. So I feel first of all, the biggest I think challenge is having clarity and having people are not probably there is a lot of, like I said, excitement to do a lot and probably solve for a lot. So that is one. Second, I believe that, like I said, that as far as regulations etc is concerned, I feel that's a very, very last kind of step. For every industry there are some gray areas and back and forth that's happening. That's fine, and that's I would believe that would be there everywhere across the world. Our countries, probably the acceptance now here is much, much more. So that is, I think, one of the last hurdles across industries for me personally. I just feel that building the right kind of team, having a very solidified vision and a very sharp, razor sharp kind of focus in terms of the short term and medium term goals, and doing all of that. And it's very cliched, but a lot of people fail at this itself, right? That is point number one. And secondly, I believe that a lot of importance and a lot of glamour is there on the fundraising, and I feel that it's very there is no clear probably I would say that there is a lot more that the founders and founding team members can do to up their game and understand the requirements of what is required. I think most of the startups fail at the fundraise stage, right? A lot of people are not able to probably raise the cash flow is, is the I think is the downfall of most people that I have at least seen around me. So and I also vouch for that. So I just feel that a little bit of understanding of that piece where most people are ending up falling in that pitfall, I think that is also a big challenge. So I personally have been very vocal within my team, at least, and within my organization, that most of the challenges that we face are internal. Probably we just we sometimes overlook them, are not cognizant about them, and I just feel that that is something that we need to address more importantly than anything else. Apart from that, the cliche external challenges are, of course, regulations, hiring issues that you face, tech being such a strong pillar, and probably while the world feels that we have the maximum amount of engineers, but probably we don't have the maximum amount of world-class products that are there in our country. I still feel that there is a lot more that we can do in terms of building real strong world-class products, which I still feel that we lack, in spite of so many so-called engineers. In fact, I'm myself an engineer, but don't know anything about engineering as such. So that's a different ballgame altogether. But those are all external. But I still believe that, I think if you look within, I think the challenges are more in how we run our organizations. I still feel we can do much better, and probably it's lack of experience also. You only learn with growing and building an organization. So I think that's there.
Yeah, I liked your idea where you mentioned that that it's important for every startup founder to probably learn from the sharks, learn from the successful predecessors, who have developed great startups. Ganesh, do you concur to the Amit's views where he mentions that most of the challenges that startups face are internal, okay, and once they're able to solve them, I think they're part of creating a larger startup ecosystem. Do you agree to that?
Yes, we've talked about the external challenges of the diverse nature of the country and the market itself, and we talked about regulations as well. But yeah, definitely, Amit has got that right. Just building the team has always been a challenge, right? And building a high quality team, particularly, right, because that's what you need to build a high quality startup. That's where I think a lot of the education has also been very much lagging behind in terms of imparting the right skills, right? And that is changing now with a lot of skill-based education and a lot of recruitment-based, value-based education that is coming through. But that's a slow process. It's slower than what you would need for supporting an entrepreneurial ecosystem like this, which is why high-quality people are, they cost you an arm and a leg, and that's hard to do when you're a early-stage startup, right? So that is one thing. The second thing is building the playbook itself on how you build your business, right? In India, the evolution of businesses have been very different from other places, right? So just in terms of the way payments and UPI has moved, in terms of the COD market that we are, the cash market that we are, even on e-commerce, right? A lot of those playbooks have to be built for building your business on the go. You learn and you build your own playbook, which you can then take out there, and hopefully somebody else will learn from you going forward. Right? Footwear brand, specifically, if I talk about our market, outside of the mass market, where there have been lots of brands in the regional and the leather space, casual footwear, other than one or two brands that have been out there primarily in offline, online has been completely new, right? So in that sense, we've had to build our own and learn by doing our mistakes, right? So that I wish there was more to learn from out there for us, because the market is evolving at such a rapid pace. In general, yes, that is also an internal challenge for us.
So basically, each category, in the startup ecosystem is at a stage, where they are creating their own playbook. There's not much to learn from the past, because we are still at the early stage of the, evolving as the startup capital of the world, right? So, Sarika, where do you see the Indian startup ecosystem by the end of 2025 or by the end of 2030?
Indian startup ecosystem is one of the fastest growing ecosystems around the world. It really, really is. I mean, what we're seeing coming out of India is phenomenal. I mean, I think we're going to have from India the most number of unicorns that we'll see around the world. It's definitely going to be one of the major ecosystems for startups around the world, hubs. I think you'll attract a lot of talent, people coming inbound to India versus leaving India or staying in India. I'm sure you already see that already, where people are choosing to stay versus leaving. So you'll retain your high quality talent. I really think it's going places. And to add to your last question, Devesh, as far as entrepreneurs, kind of looking at the past and their seniors as far as using them as an example, I think because of the way the world is changing and the way things are evolving, and what worked for one company may not necessarily work for another company, even in that same genre. I think entrepreneurs need to use their intuition and just forge their own path and figure it out. Because sometimes when this worked at that time for that person, it may not necessarily work for your company in that same way because things have just changed. Timing has changed. The people you're meeting have evolved. The customer has changed. So advice always to entrepreneurs is to just see what's happening at that time, find your mentors and get current advice for that moment and keep moving forward is what I think will help you forge your own path and be unique. You know, VCs really look for uniqueness as well. So
Ganesh, what do you think? I mean, the Indian startup ecosystem, where will it be by 2025 or 2030?
Speaking from the brand space where I am, I think this really is the decade of brands for India. Affordability and discretionary spending has hit that inflection point where people are starting to ask what is there beyond the pure functional mass brands that are on offer, and why should I emotionally invest in a brand? Right? What is there beyond the basics is what people are asking. So there is a lot explosion across categories is what you will see now. It has already started, and the next 3 to 5 years you will see a significant number of brands coming through with specific targeting, specific positioning, and specific segments that they are going after, and pricing as well, right? So across the board. India has traditionally been a brand-starved country, so it's high time that people start talking about it. That is one. Just in terms of unicorns, you talked about that. I think Amit, you should run a fantasy bet on this one. But I believe that the first 100 took until early this year to make. But the next 3 to 5 years, you will see the next 100 easily coming through very quickly.
True. I think it's the compounding effect. That's what we call in the banking system. Yeah. So finally, Amit, what's your thoughts, and how do you see the Indian startup ecosystem evolving in the next 3 to 5 years?
So I'm probably not the best numbers guy, so I wouldn't be able to comment on where our unicorns and our startup ecosystem will be at in terms of numbers. But I think on a lighter note, I believe that more like Ganesh was saying, that I think now the marriage conversations will shift more towards people who are working for startups than those working for traditional companies. I think how I foresee this over the next 3 to 5 years, that if you don't have a startup experience in your CV, I think people have and it's already started happening, and I don't really agree with it. In fact, I strongly disagree with it, but I've started seeing people judging people as not adventurous enough, probably not cool enough, or not ambitious enough if you don't have a startup experience on your CV. And like I say, I completely disagree with it. I it's not that grass is always greener on the other side, but I believe that everything has its own merits. A corporate job can never be considered as uncool, or probably it's something that I still believe that works very well for most people. So I just feel that it will become, it will become more glamorous, and has continued to be more glamorous and stable at that as well. I just feel that overall the startup commentary that's happening across the world, not just in India, is around people focusing on real businesses, businesses which really are making money, businesses which have the intent to make money, have a path to making money, etc. So I just believe that it will become more stable, apart from being glamorous. I just feel that it will become more, people will take more punts. You will see it getting bigger and bigger, and India, of course, I think is going to be the hub, because like I said, the problem statement in India is here to be solved. So I just feel it's good times ahead for the next 3 to 5 years, irrespective of how the global economy is.
Great, Amit. I think that was a wonderful analysis of how India's startup ecosystem is set to evolve in the next 3 to 5 years, because there are many problems that are still needed to be solved, and there are a lot of ambitious people who are looking at to solve these problems. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining today with me on this session. It was lovely interacting with you, trying to understand India's startup story, how some of the challenges that need to be solved, what are the kind of, what is the VC's view, what are the global VC's view, how they look at it, and, what are the overall funding systems. Thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. It was lovely interacting with you.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was a lovely session. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.